Welcome to Renters' Rights Radio.
Welcome to Renters' Rights Radio with attorney Debi Rumph, founder of the law offices of Debi Rumph. Debi has spent years helping Florida tenants understand their rights, protect themselves in unfair situations, and take strategic steps when landlords fall short. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're diving into one of the most common issues renters face: repair disputes, mold, pests, and other conditions that make a home unsafe or unlivable. Miss Debi, my dear, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful, Evan. How are you doing?
I'm well. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. Since it's your first episode, can you share a little bit about your background and what drew you to advocate for those Florida tenants?
Absolutely, Evan. I'm a native. I'm born and raised here in Orlando. I went to Edgewater High School, go Eagles. Went to University of Central Florida, go Knights. Went up to the University of Florida for law school, go Gators, right? So I am a grown homegrown Orlando native. What got me interested in tenants' right is after graduating from law school, I had the pleasure of working for some large firms. It was really nice power plays, working with clients with big pockets, but that's not why I went to law school. So I started to question, is this really what I wanted to be doing? And a
Mm,
wonderful opportunity presented itself. The FAMU University had just started a law school here in Orlando, and so I ventured off to teach law school. Loved teaching, loved my students, and one of the biggest issues my students were facing in their personal lives is landlord tenant. And so I started advocating for them. There weren't many attorneys doing that law on purpose. And so I jumped in and I love representing the underdog. And so I got very addicted to representing tenants.
that's amazing. So when a renter encounters a repair issue for the first time, what do they need to understand right at the beginning of that process?
They need to understand that they should assume nothing. I
Mhm.
find that a lot of renters make a lot of assumptions, and that is something that they should not do.
Hmm. So if someone reports the mold, the pest, leaks, or any other serious condition, and nothing is seeming to be happening, like what actions tend to move the situation forward?
The first thing that a tenant should do is prove to the landlord that they can navigate the legal system. Navigating the legal system means starting the lease termination process. If a tenant does not prove that they're able to do that to a landlord, it's unlikely that the landlord is going to take any action to make the repairs.
So, Ms. Debbie, so documentation can influence these disputes that I've seen, even me personally. For a tenant who isn't sure how to start, what are some simple ways to track the problems they're experiencing?
Well, documentation is everything. Like I love to tell my clients that testimony is not what wins a particular case in front of court. Instead, it's the testimony that describes the written documents that are in the dispute. I tell my clients to communicate all the issues in writing, and I tell them to keep copies of all of their writings. This is especially true if they're communicating with the landlord through a portal. Many tenants will communicate with landlords on the portal, and
Mhm.
they won't keep copies of those items on the portal. As you can imagine, once a dispute arises, the landlord will either shut the tenant out of the portal or communications will start to disappear. So it's very important for tenants to not only communicate in writing, but to also keep copies of those writings.
Hmm. So many renters wonder how long they're expected to wait after notifying a landlord about unsafe conditions. How do you explain what tenants should realistically expect around that, the timing process?
So, under Florida law, there are some laws that apply. Under Florida law, there's a statute, Florida Statutes 8356, and that particular statute says that if the tenant informs the landlord correctly, that the tenant could give the landlord 7 days notice to make
Mm,
repairs. Now, there are some other statutes that indicate that the tenant doesn't have to give the landlord 7 days, but the landlords, for some reason, focus on that 7 day window. So, for our purposes here today, I would just say most tenants should expect the landlord to make repairs in about 7 days. Most repairs that aren't extremely dangerous or put their safety at risk, they should expect about 7 days.
But living with those unresolved hazards can be stressful. What practical steps can help a tenant stay protected both legally and day to day while they're waiting for those repairs?
Okay. So for me, one of the things that I notice quite a bit is that a lot of our clients get stressed out over this situation. So I tend to deal with a lot of the emotional trauma that comes with it. And so one of the things I like to tell tenants to do is to focus on the controllables versus the non-controllables.
Hmm.
And stop focusing on the things that you can't control and start focusing on some of the things that you can. So you can't control whether or not the landlord is going to actually make the repairs. You really can't control when the landlord is going to make the repairs or how the landlord is going to make the repairs. However, you can control having a plan for each one of those scenarios, whether the landlord makes the repairs, doesn't make the repairs, or makes the repairs but doesn't make them adequately. And that's what I tend to tell my clients to focus on to protect themselves. They want to document everything that's going on in writing. For example, if the landlord comes in, does an inspection, but doesn't do any work, document that. Whether you want to send an email to the landlord saying, hey, I just want to verify you came through, nothing was done, or if you just keep a journal and journal all of these events, that is how the tenant could best protect themselves during the repair process or that 7 day window.
Mm. And before we wrap things up, can you share a situation you've handled that shows how good documentation or persistence can shift the outcome for a tenant dealing with unsafe conditions?
Absolutely. I have dealt with tenants who were in this particular circumstance many times. A lot of tenants feel hopeless. Um, the raw sewage cases are the cases that tend to come up in my mind quite a bit. I
Mhm.
had a client, she had communicated with the landlord that raw sewage was not just coming up in every drain in the bathrooms, but they were also coming up in the kitchen as well. So she tried to communicate, tried to negotiate with the landlord. She really wanted the landlord to make the repairs. The landlord had decided not to make the repairs. It was a huge apartment complex, and the whole building was experiencing these issues. So because she had documented, and then when we were hired, we documented all of our efforts to get the landlord to make the repairs. The landlord was forced to waive the termination fee. Would you believe the landlord wanted to charge my client a termination fee when she terminated the lease to move out for her safety? But
Wow.
because we had all of that documentation, the landlord was forced not only to reverse the termination fees, but they provided my client with a full return of their security deposit, and we were able to negotiate a partial rent refund for my client who experienced that severe disrepair.
Amazing. Miss Debbie, thank you for the time.
Thank you.
That wraps up today's episode of Renters Rights Radio with attorney Debi Rumph. If you're a Florida tenant dealing with unsafe living conditions, repair delays, or pressures from a landlord, you don't have to navigate it alone. Visit DebiRumph.com to learn more about Debi's unbundled legal services and the strategic tools available to help you protect your rights. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Evan.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.